All right, so today we're going to multiply with fractions as the solution. So please write down your math goal and what you already know about multiplying fractions and then come back to me. Okay, here's our first problem. What is 1/5 of 3? What is the sum of the unit fractions and draw a model? So that's what we're going to be doing today. So let's take a look at that. Okay, so one thing to keep in mind is 1/5 of 3 is the same as taking 1/5 of each of the acres and combining them. We can show this mathematically because remember, of means multiplication, right? Okay, so this is the same thing as 1/5 times 3, which is the same thing as 1/5 times 1 plus 1 plus 1. I can break this 3 apart into 1 plus 1 plus 1. Then that's the same thing. The distributive property tells me I can do 1/5 times 1 plus 1/5 times 1 plus 1/5 times 1, right? Which is the same thing as if I multiply 1/5 times 1, I'm going to get 1/5. 1/5 times 1, I'm going to get 1/5. 1/5 times 1, I'm going to get 1/5. So the sum of the unit fractions is what I'm doing is I'm taking a fifth plus a fifth plus a fifth because I have 3 in total, but I'm only taking a fifth of each one of those 3. So it's 1/5 plus 1/5 plus 1/5, which equals 3/5. Okay. The other way to look at this is just write numerator times numerator, denominator times denominator. So here, 1/5 times 3 is the same thing as 1/5 times 3 over 1. Remember, because we put a 1 underneath. If there's no denominator, we put a 1, and then I just simply multiply numerator times numerator. 1 times 3 is 3. 5 times 1 is 5. It equals 3/5. Now let's look at a model of that. Okay, in my model here, I have my 3 acres. So here's an acre, here's an acre, here's an acre. And they're divided up into fifths. So I did my drawing and divided them up to fifths. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. I'm taking 1/5 of this acre, 1/5 of that acre, 1/5 of that acre. So 1/5 plus 1/5 plus 1/5 gives me 3/5. So I know that the math is easy, numerator times numerator, denominator times denominator, and it gives you your answer. But I want you to see it. You need to be able to see it and understand what it means because you're taking 1/5 of the 3. So you're taking 1/5 of each of those 3. Okay, let's take a look at another one. Farmer Smith has 4 acres of land. So he has 4 acres of land. He plows 1/3 of his land. What area has a farmer plowed? Write an expression using unit fractions and make a model. So let's take a look at that. Okay, so I know that simply you can just do 4 acres of land. He plows 1/3 of this land. So of his land tells me to multiply. So I can just simply multiply 4 times 1/3. I put a 1 underneath my denominator. 4 times 1 is 4. 1 times 3 is 3. My numerator is bigger. 4 is more than 3, so that means I need to divide. 3 goes into 4 one time. So it goes in one whole time, 1 left over, 1 and 1/3. Now, to do it a model, this is what I want you to understand. I want you to understand what it actually means, not just multiply them out. So it means you have 4 acres, 1 acre, 2 acres, 3 acres, 4 acres. So I have 4 acres and he plows 1/3 of each of those acres. So 1/3 of this one, 1/3 of this one, 1/3 of that one, 1/3 of that one. So I have 1/3 of each one of those. I have 1, 2, 3, 4 thirds, 1 and 1/3. So this is my sum of the unit fractions, and here's my model. Okay, you ready to try one? Okay, so here's one for you to try. What area does she plow? What is 1/7 of 2? What is the sum of the unit fractions and make a model? So just like we've been doing, just like at the last two. So what's 1/7 of 2? Do a sum of the unit fractions and make a model, then come back to me. Okay, so what area does she plow? What's 1/7 of 2? So 1/7 of 2 means multiplication. So 1/7 times 2. Put a 1 underneath. 1 times 2 is 2. 7 times 1 is 7. 2 sevens. Okay. What is the sum of the unit fractions? So I have 2 acres, 1 acre, 2 acres, and they're in 7. So I divided them into sevens. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. And I only have 1/7, 1/7 of each one. So there's my sum of unit fractions, 2 sevens, same thing. All right. All right, so you try some. Multiply by fraction. So multiply a unit fraction or a fraction times a whole number. So go ahead and do these. So stop the video, do 1/6 times 5, 4/5 times 3, 1/8 times 3, and 5/6 times 4, and then come back to me. Okay, so 1/6 times 5, your answer should be 5/6, right? Because if you put a 1, you got to put a 1 under in the denominator. 1 times 5 is 5. 6 times 1 is 6. 4/5 times 3, got to put a 1 underneath my denominator. 4 times 3 is 12. 5 times 1 is 5. 12/5. Okay. Put a 1 underneath for my denominator. 1 times 3 is 3. 8 times 1 is 8. 3/8. And got to put a 1 underneath my denominator. 5 times 4 is 20. 6 times 1 is 6. And on some of these, right, did you simplify some of these? Because 5/6, well, I can't simplify that, right? Because 5 is already smaller than 6. 3 is smaller than 8. But 12, is it smaller than 5? No, so that means I must divide. So you can actually simplify that, right? 5 goes into 12 how many times? 2 times, so 2 whole times. 5 times 2 is 10. How many more to 12? 10, 11, 12, 2 more. So 2 and 2/5 is the simplified version for that one. Then 20 is bigger than 6, right? So that means I must divide. So how many times does 6 go into 20? 6 times 3, right? 6 times 3, so it's 3 whole times. 6 times 3 is 18. How many more to 20? 18, 19, 20. 2 more. 2, 6. And actually, I can simplify that even further, right? Because I can divide both by 2. I can divide, so my 3 stays the same, 3 wholes. I can divide 2 by 2, which gives me 1. And I can divide 6 by 2, which gives me 3. 3 and 1/3. All right. All right, so what did you learn today? Write down what you learned. Proof of learning by solving a problem similar to what we did, and a reflection in a question you may have.